Sean, we got to kick off on the alpha and omega of politics,
Mm-hmm.
which is Mark Carney. He comes off an extended honeymoon stretching back to the April 2025 election. Where do you think he's at
I ain't
politically
got
right
no
now?
idea, bro.
Like if you were to trade him on the TSX, would this be like a blue chip bank stock? Price to perfection at all-time highs, like many of our corporate financials are right now, or is this still a company,
Still some sort of weird, crazy ass shit.
startup mode with more room to grow?
Well, I think I would say, to extend your metaphor, that credit rating agencies might be at less
Items.
sensitive
Nah,
financial
that's like a
vulnerabilities.
website shit.
You probably saw
We're
some
rejecting all
reports
those.
I did over recent days where, as we kind of anticipated, right now,
Inventory. What do we got?
patience and tolerance with the ongoing uncertainty with the Trump administration is not unending. That the Prime Minister's entire case to Canadians in the March-April election was that he was best placed to secure a deal with the Trump administration at various points.
Harvester, not interested.
In the post-election period, we were told deals were forthcoming.
Look, let's just do some Stella Montes while we're here.
With really no progress, and in fact seemingly walking backwards into the potential abrogation of the USMCA. So he enters the year maybe at a peak and some potential vulnerabilities that I think will play out over the next 12 months.
Yeah. What's that famous line? Which UK Prime Minister was it who was asked, for the Second World War, what do you fear most? And he said, "Events, dear boy."
Macmillan, yeah. Jim Flaherty loved that quote.
Can I change the name of this?
So,
I think
there
I
are
can.
a lot of events. 2026 is going to be packed with uncertainty around Kuzma, with who knows.
Just bear with me. I'm trying to fix
Quebec
something here.
election,
My
the
channel.
return
Yes,
to
my
the,
channel.
Parti Québécois. There's going to be a lot of hot files on the Prime Minister's desk. I guess what I wonder starting the year, Sean, is this unresolved issue around affordability. I think that is, if you want to look at a big trend that carried over from last year.
Yeah, I'm literally just like super quick.
And I mean, God bless our Prime Minister. I don't think he's been in a grocery store in a couple decades. This is a guy, hey, to his credit, has been very successful at Goldman Sachs and banks that I understand.
Where the hell am I?
Kitchens and caterers.
Am I near the seed vault? No, I'm near the archives.
But the point is that this is not a government that I think has much to answer Canadians' persistent and ongoing concerns about affordability. And I don't know about you, but just through the Christmas holidays, you have this feeling of what's that Scotiabank slogan? You're richer than you think. I'd kind of flip that around to you're poorer than you think. The pernicious effects of inflation and the price increases that we saw that predominantly happened now well over 24 months ago are persisting. And I know high-level political economic analysis, but grocery prices are up, I think, in the last.
Not getting that one, bro.
Rate of more than 4%. So for average Canadians who.
I do love it when I first get in there and I'm killed in the first 30 seconds. I'll rather continue. Blah, 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 blah. Right?
I think are feeling
We're going in with a free loadout.
a lot of stress. And this would be my final.
So I like being killed super quick.
Prime Minister is layer on top of that housing in this country, which is going through now a 2-year plus adjustment downwards. People's single biggest asset is worth less. It's worth less than it was 24 months ago. It's worth less than it was 12 months ago. It's worth less than it was 6 months ago. So, Sean, to throw it back to you, how does the Prime Minister kind of answer? Are these questions even answerable? Because they're so big, they deal with factors and forces, outside the control of a federal budget or PMO. What does he do about this feeling that we're all poorer than we think?
such a great set of observations, Roger. You know, one way to think about it is Pierre Poilievre was cruising to 24 Sussex or wherever the Prime Minister lives these days when the focus was the microeconomy, the pocketbook, the household budget. And the only thing that stood between him and becoming the Prime Minister was the issue set flipped to a macroeconomic one, a focus on the Canada-U.S. relationship and the potential threats and provocations from the Trump administration and what it meant for Canada's economy and possibly for the country itself. And another way to put that tension or trade-off between the macroeconomy and the microeconomy is what David Coletto, our regular guest on Hub Politics, talks about is precarity versus scarcity. When the focus was on scarcity, Pierre Poilievre was winning. When it became precarity, it advantaged Carney. And the point that Coletto is making, including on our pages, look ahead, listeners and viewers, to Monday's newsletter where we'll feature the latest numbers from Coletto. While the Trump issue continues to loom large, the scarcity mindset, the microeconomic issues never went away. For a large share of Canadians, they remain, in fact, the top issue. And as the negotiations continue to languish, and in fact Trump turns his attention to everything but Canada, you do get the sense, Roger, that scarcity mindset, those microeconomic questions are going to climb further and further up the priority list for a growing number of Canadians. And because Poilievre and the Conservatives never really pivoted away from those issues, just from a pure political point of view, setting aside policy for a minute, they should be advantaged. It's worth noting, for instance, that at various points since the election, the Liberals were up by about, somewhere as high as 10 points.
Where is it? Where's the fucking exploding thing?
Basically, in a statistic
There it is.
The gap has closed again between the two major parties, and I think that is essentially rooted in the tension playing out in our society. Are you a parity voter? If no, you're a Carney voter. If you're a scarcity voter, you're a Poilievre voter. And I think the fortunes of the two parties will depend in part on, as the year plays out, which issue dominates the minds of the Canadians.
Does that, Sean, make it more likely that Carney accepts, because there are real political costs that would come to achieving the majority solely through fork clusters as opposed to
Booker!
because I agree with you. I think these polls that show a surprise
I'm out of ammo already? No.
in terms of the Conservative vote, despite what we've documented at the Hub have been some stumbles by Poilievre over the fall and difficulties in rebranding and repositioning himself in the current context. It still shows strong voter intention for the Conservatives, not up near their election high where they garnered, 41% of the vote.
Come on.
A high watermark in terms of recent elections for the party. So does this, I think, I'm asking you a partly rhetorical question here, but my sense is that if I was the Prime Minister and I'm dealing with these issues that are largely outside of my control, like inflation, like long overdue, probably now multi-year readjustment in again the single largest asset class Canadians own, housing, and then layer over top of that, the economy seemed okay, but the latest GDP numbers weren't great. There seems to be, some contraction as we rounded out the year. So does he go for a majority, and, damn the consequences in terms of a lot of Canadians understandably feeling that majority is the product of, what's the legal term? Some poison fruit, that there's something at the origin of it that isn't a clean win, a clean mandate, what a majority government is when it's awarded to you at the polls.
Yeah, I think there's really something to that. I'd say a few things in response. First, for Carney himself, I think it risks undermining his greatest political strength or asset, which is that people see him as sort of transcending politics. You saw that in some of the letters to the editors in the newspapers over the holiday break, people really kind of put him on a pedestal, separate and above from the kind of machinations of politics. And so there is a risk that securing a majority through floor crossings undermines what precisely people like about him. Second, the closing of the gap and the relative strength of the Conservatives entering the year may cause potential would-be floor crossers to revisit those assumptions that that the Conservative Party as a political vehicle maybe isn't as dinged up and damaged as they might have thought. Which brings me to my third point. We've been doing this podcast for 2 or 3 years now. I love doing it with you. One of the inherent challenges of this type of punditry is just how a lot of these forms of political analysis hang on some really kind of narrow lines, don't they? Like, I was thinking about it last night going to bed. If the Conservatives lose the next election, possibly this year, that'll be 5 elections in a row. And it will naturally lead to questions about whether the 21st century risks looking a lot like the 20th century, with the Liberals as the natural governing party and the Conservatives on the outside looking in. On the other hand, if they win the next election, a Conservative Party will have in this century won about half the elections that have played out, and you can tell a totally different story about the kind of relative durability and strength of the modern Conservative Party. So, in a political environment where the two major parties are essentially tied, the Liberals probably have a slight structural advantage, just given the kind of nature of the country, the demography, the distribution of population, and so on.
Run out of ammo real goddamn quick with that one.
For either leader entering 2026 can be pretty significant. It doesn't take much to kind of fundamentally change the fortunes of the different parties and their leaders, and you only have to ask Pierre Poilievre about his 2025 to know that.
Yeah, well, this has been my last contribution to this segment of the show, which is to talk a little bit, though, about Mark Carney's continuing honeymoon and how far that could extend into 2026, the extent to which that could insulate him from a lot of these variables, these factors and forces that we've been discussing.
Bye-bye.
He can't control, like housing, like inflation, like the larger macro direction of the economy. And you mentioned, some end-of-year Globe and Mail letters to the editor that caught your and my eye, just because they were so toe-cringingly gushing about the Prime Minister. I just want to read 2 of them to you, 2 little snippets from the Globe. I think this was on letters to the editor the 29th of December. Donald Hall from Ottawa writes, Mark Carney has, in his first 9 months as Prime Minister, materially changed the trajectory of our country in ways that I could not have imagined, and I believe he's just getting started. In spite of the woeful state of the world, I'm more optimistic than I've ever been in a long time and look forward to the unfolding of a new and truly better Canada. And then this one really got me. This is Glenna Jenkins from Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Mark Carney's quiet intellect, careful diplomacy, and thoughtful strategy are meeting the moment domestically and internationally. Our nation couldn't possibly ask for more from a Prime Minister. I mean, Sean, I mock these people for this ridiculous.
It's getting a bit much.
I don't think anyone should imbue elected politicians with this degree of hope and
yeah, it's a bit creepy.
It's a recipe for disappointment. But these letters, and again, we're making fun of them. Maybe we shouldn't, but we are, or I am. They do speak to this cohort, don't they, Sean? Probably of boomers. I expect Glenna and Donald are over 65 years of age. He just has these people. They are enthralled with him. He represents something to them that is, I don't know, reassuring, comforting. I wouldn't underestimate the degree to which the Donalds and Glennas of this world are legion in number across the country amongst that demographic cohort of boomerdom. and that this could provide the prime minister with some political legs to, stand up to the vagaries, the events of 2026.
Yeah, this has been a big part of the story of Canadian politics for the past 12 months. And, at the risk of sounding immodest, I think the hub was out ahead of these trends.
Not enough rubber parts. Are we serious right now? Still don't have enough rubber parts?
Playing out in our economy and in turn,
all right,
our politics. It's wrapped up in various dynamics, including the extent to which older Canadians seem more put out by Trump's provocations, the 51st state stuff, etc. Maybe they're more imbued by just an inherent anti-Americanism. There's the extent to which it reflects a kind of quote-unquote luxury belief that for younger Canadians, those microeconomic concerns are so great that they can't afford to concern themselves as much with some of these deeper or somewhat symbolic questions. At the risk of provoking some of our older listeners, though, and let me say we love our older subscribers. My mom and dad are listening. Hi, Mom and Dad. How much do you think Rudyard is, in a way, a last gasp of the boomer generation wanting to maintain its monopoly over our politics? Like, one of the interesting things that has played out, at least federally, and gone kind of underexplored or examined by our media, is the extent to which our major parties have gone through generational change in the past few election cycles. You look at the front bench of the Conservatives or even the Liberals, a lot of millennials, some Gen Zs. Pierre Poilievre is not much older than me. He's sort of on the cusp of a millennial and a Gen Xer. Justin Trudeau represented a kind of the assumption of power of the Gen X population. And yet, just as we're on the cusp of what looks like a durable generation change, the boomers kind of grab control of the political system and restore their guy to office. It's worth noting that as much as we talk about the significance of the boomer generation as a kind of economic and demographic cohort, the truth is today, Rudyard, millennials are the single largest voting group in the country. Not necessarily by turnout, but just by sheer numbers. So I don't know. I don't want to attribute ill intent, but you do get the sense that in some ways we're like having a debate over which generation or which population groups are going to control our politics, and this represents the last gasp of the boomers trying to hold on.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something there. And just as we wrap up this segment, I guess my final riff off that is I think that Mark Carney's two superpowers with this boomer cohort are nostalgia and stability. Yeah. And I think it's that he, the international travel, for instance, that he does, he likes international travel. It's clear. It harkens back to an era that millennials and Gen Z just would have no experience of, other than reading in their history books about Lester B. Pearson and the invention of peacekeeping, or Louis Saint Laurent and the creation of NATO. This idea of Canada as the indispensable kind of middle power.
Yes.
And it's just demonstrably over. I mean, the world has changed. Canada's smaller relatively and economically, politically, and otherwise. But Carney has an ability to simulate, to create a kind of a perception of Canada astride the world stage. And I think he does that in so many different ways because he is a boomer himself. This is part of his historical memory and context and nostalgia.
Would you call him a boomer? Is he a boomer?
Is a very powerful thing. And the other very powerful thing is the status quo. Boomers, understandably,
Right, now because I've spent the last 20 minutes putting all this together, I will be killed almost instantly. So let's go.
They've enjoyed the rise in asset prices, particularly housing, over the last 20-odd years. They have, as we've documented at the Hub, organized the federal government and its finances in such a way that, what is it, north of $100 billion in transfers go to senior citizens that, things like OAS, I believe, in a combined household has an income cutoff of what, $180,000 a year or something, so an astronomically high number. You've written about how, there's higher levels of poverty and kind of insecurity amongst younger age groups, not children,
Where are we?
but young adults,
Just up. We're on the ground.
anything approaching.
Damn it! I have to get up.
Great for seniors. They've done that because they do turn out to vote. They're high incident voters. They're studiously courted by the political parties. But the result is that I think, and again, our boomers aren't going to like this who are listening to this, but we have this inherent kind of conservatism in our politics as a result of that, an inability to contemplate different alternative futures for the country.
Yes.
That I think demonstrably against, again, whatever metric you want to choose, productivity, per capita GDP, our relative, purchasing power vis-a-vis Canada and the United States, our rankings in the OECD for future economic growth over the next decade. The country's a mess. Like, its future prospects are not great, and they're not great to the extent to which you would think that it's timeless. The deputy governor of the Bank of Canada said, what was that back in 2024? Break the glass, pull the alarm. We have a crisis. But I think Carney is part of this boomer hegemony. You're right, the end of it, the final gasp. It could last 5 years, it could last 10 years. And I think if it will do anything to the country, it will delay.
He's gone that way. There's still someone. That thing's busted up. Look at that.
All the evidence points to need to happen now, and that by delaying it, the costs of those reforms, when they actually are implemented, because the boomers have finally exited stage left, and younger cohorts at that point so frustrated by stifled growth and stifled life expectations and opportunities, will act. And I think, hopefully, I don't know, someone around the Prime Minister, somebody would be thinking about his legacy. And I think his legacy is at risk of succumbing to this conservatism, not ideological, but this risk aversion that runs deep through the boomer cohort that are his most loyal defenders.
Yep.
Yeah. Well said. I won't take too much time to respond because we've got important things to talk about on the second half of the show, including the extent to which the Toronto Maple Leafs are a good stand-in for a lot of the things you just said: mediocrity, nostalgia, etc. The only point I'll make is what's really interesting, Roger, and been neglected from some of the fiscal policy discussions we've had since the fall budget, is the Harper government, of which I was a part, made changes to the OAS eligibility age, increasing it from 65 to 67 gradually, such that, Roger, had the Trudeau government not reversed those changes, they would be starting to produce meaningful fiscal results today. About $67 billion in net savings to the government, climbing up to north of $10 billion by the end of the decade. That is real money, more than the equivalent of a percentage point of the GST.
Fuck
So
you.
We are all paying a 1% or more sales tax on all of the purchases that we make because the Liberals, supported in part by older Canadians, decided to reverse what was a pretty common sense and pragmatic change.
This is why you only ever go in there with a free goddamn loadout.
In line with changes in life expectancy. It's a concrete example of the resistance to change that you're talking about, and the long-term costs that that resistance will have for our public finances and for younger Canadians.
Yeah, great example. Well, let's say goodbye to our complimentary listeners and viewers. Sean and I are going to join our Hub Heroes and Hub Fellows on the other side of this short break to talk about
So I think it is, unfortunately, we're going to see more of the iron fist now, cracking down, particularly if protests get more violent.
Now, Donald Trump says the US is locked and loaded and ready to go if Iran cracks down on protests in the country. Iran's responded by saying American bases in the region would be legitimate targets if the nation intervenes. At least 6 people are reported to have been killed yesterday after almost a week of mass protests sparked by worsening economic conditions.
Shut up! Please 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 shut up!
The protests began on Sunday with shopkeepers venting their anger at another sharp fall in the value of the Iranian currency, the rial, against the US dollar. By Tuesday, university students were involved and the protests spread to several cities. We can speak now to Rob McCare, who's a former UK ambassador to Iran, and Dr. Sanam Vakil, who's the director of the Middle East and North Africa programme at Chatham House. Welcome both and thanks for joining me. Let's start with what Trump said this morning. If Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. Dr. Vakil, how likely do you think US intervention might be?
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. This is certainly a new position from Donald Trump. The U.S. administration has, in many rounds of previous Iranian protests, tried to support protesters, but also made clear that they would not directly intervene, as any political change should certainly come through the work and volition of Iranians themselves and shouldn't echo past American efforts of involvement dating back 50, 75, or 100 years of interference in Iran's domestic politics. So this is a new effort perhaps to pressure the Iranian system and perhaps to maybe empower protesters at the same time. But I think this sort of commentary could be dangerous for all sides. Certainly ordinary Iranians are feeling emboldened and going out on the streets, risking their own lives.
I have that already.
It would be important that they also be careful, because the Islamic Republic has repeatedly cracked down on protests. It has been no stranger to these sort of protests in the past, and I certainly worry about the life and longer-term livelihood of these young people out there.
Rob, as a former ambassador to Iran, do you agree? What do you think the best course of action would be for President Trump?
Yeah, I do agree. Thanks very much, Dom. I think Sanam is right about this completely. And although no one would want to predict confidently what President Trump is going to do ever, it does feel like this is the sort of saber rattling that tries to encourage people in Iran to put pressure on their regime and tries to hasten regime change. And it doesn't feel very likely to succeed. I think if you're being cynical about it, you'd say the best thing that President Trump could do to help the regime would be to loose off a few missiles at regime targets, because that would simply make it look as if these protests are part of an international conspiracy to overthrow the regime, which is how the regime will always want to portray these sorts of demonstrations. And clearly they're spontaneous and they're the result of huge frustration, initially economically, but as with each round of protests, so with these ones, we've seen the initial spark then leading to a wider bandwagon of people joining, because people are so frustrated with the regime itself. So I don't think that it's very difficult to see how US military intervention or any other forms of intervention could really help the protesters, and it might well indeed lead people to be a bit more cautious about joining in. So I think it is the US can't really threaten much more economic pressure, because it's already a sort of policy on Iran. So quite hard to see how outside players can physically support the protesters. But obviously it's very important that we
do it.
Shows that we are on the side of people who are protesting legitimately against lacking in legitimacy and failing to deliver for its people.
As you said, these protests started regarding the soaring cost of living. Why has Iran's economy changed so much recently?
Well, it's not just because of sanctions, but obviously that plays a significant role in the pressure on the economy. There's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of mismanagement. And one of the things that sanctions do is they distort the economy. So it is, you do see that the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, tend to have more control over oil smuggling and other import and export routes under this heavy sanctions burden, which diverts more money towards the regime and away from the sort of middle class private sector that maybe would provide a more moderate alternative pole of attraction inside the country. But it is, I think you've got to remember is that this government came in on a platform of economic reform. They said they were going to deliver better economic results for the people. And on the one hand, that would be about getting an agreement with the West that lifts sanctions. But on the other hand, there were a lot of promises there about what the government would do for ordinary people, and the cost of living has just gone up. Inflation's gone up, food inflation 72% compared to last year, and the currency has dropped in value by more than a half over the last 6 months. So, it's because the government has been promising economic reform and it's just got worse that I think people feel, this regime is not delivering anything for us.
Dr. Vakil, you've written about women and politics in Iran, and of course many of the past protests have been fighting against the morality police, enforced hijab wearing. So considering this is a protest against economic conditions, or started off...
Still not enough space.
How different is this in comparison to past protests?
Well, these protests do bear some similarities to, as of right now, protests that we saw in 2017, 2018, and another round that broke out in the winter of 2019.
Medical storage. Okay.
Share in similarity the economic nature and the quick spread of the protests to smaller towns and cities across the country. And in those small towns and cities, what we are witnessing now and what we saw then were small crowds coming together to chant.
Sensors. I have to find something to do with these.
Violent, maybe trying to attack government buildings. And, security forces trying to simultaneously overwhelm these groups and these crowds at the same time. Protests for the time being have...
I had no idea I had that.
In the larger cities, in Tehran, for example, it is a Friday, so everything is closed more or less, and we'll have to see how things continue. I think from the government perspective...
Weapons.
They're trying to inject some new tactics to these protests. The government, Pezeshkian, the president, has tried to reach out to the protesters, to the strikers, those leading the economic protests, to try to quote-unquote negotiate. At the same time, the government does need to address and manage the...
If I went out with that, I'd absolutely kick myself if I lost it. Like, no bullshit. Absolutely kick myself.
What does come next from the government side will be an effort to try to placate protesters, control the violence, and simultaneously engage in subsidy reform that is necessary while the Iranian economy is contracting.
Oh, God.
The Iranian government does not have access to liquidity abroad, so it's a tricky dynamic for them. Increased loss of life or increased violence is going to attract that international attention, and President Trump pretends to be watching.
Rob McKay, Iran's Prosecutor General Mohammad Movahedi Azad warned that any attempt to create instability will be met with what he called a decisive response, whilst President Masoud Pezeshkian has said his government will listen to the legitimate demands of the protesters. Two conflicting points there. What do you expect the Iranian government's response to be?
I think that you've seen this very clear attempt by the authorities to make a distinction between the economic protesters, particularly the traders and shopkeepers who've come out and who started this, from what they call destructive elements. And we will see this dual approach of trying to crack down on violence and at the same time find ways to appease the broader underlying concerns that are out there, and that's not new in Iran. I think the regime has, as Sanam was saying, has seen a lot of protests over recent years, and it's always tried to manage it in both those ways, and it's tried to distinguish between the legitimate voice of people protesting and the so-called sort of violent elements. And the truth is that it's not quite that simple, because if you look at the social media or you look at the interviews with the small traders who started this, they're all incredibly fed up with the regime. They're not regime loyalists who are just saying they want a couple of measures changed. Everyone is just fed up with the inability of the regime to deliver. So I think it is, unfortunately, we're going to see more of the iron fist now, cracking down, particularly if protests get more violent. But at the same time, there will be this attempt to try to drive a wedge inside the protest movement.
And just briefly, both of you, how likely do you think it is that we see American intervention?
I would say I hesitate to predict what President Trump will do, but I think not very likely, because it's very hard to see how they could do anything that would be useful in the circumstances.
Dr. Vakil?
I share Rob's assessment. I think it's highly unlikely, and this doesn't fit within the mandate of President Trump's America First foreign policy. So rhetorical support and perhaps using this as an opportunity to actually accomplish what he says he wants to accomplish, which is a deal with the Islamic Republic.
Interesting times ahead. Thank you very much for joining me. Rob McCare, a former UK ambassador to Iran, and Dr. Sanam Vakil, the director of the Middle East and North Africa programme at Chatham House.
Okay.
In Marvdasht, how far is Putin prepared to go?
Russia could annex eastern Ukraine and have a go at the Baltic at the same time as China goes after Taiwan. Then think about what happens to the global economic system as everybody scrabbles to impose sanctions on China, cut off Russian gas, rearm.
If Ukraine falls, we're next. The Rest is Politics is powered by Fuse Energy, and Fuse are now offering £20 credit.
Slemontes, let's get ready to die.
If you switch to a fixed tariff before the end of August.
They've listened carefully to their customers, and the number one request was gas tariffs. So now at last you can switch both your gas and electricity.
Someone's over here.
One supplier,
there he is.
One bill, one less quagmire to navigate.
It's also cheaper. Fuse gas and electricity customers typically save £150 versus the price cap.
Today's political climate.
All right.
Control and clarity. Well,
last random person killed me, so I'm a little jumpy.
Comes to your energy bill.
And they began with a mission, which was to make electricity cheaper, cleaner, simpler. And Fuse now supplies over 50,000 homes across the UK, all done quietly, efficiently, and without a single campaign bus tour.
Fuse's support is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with real people replying in under 2 minutes.
So go to fuseenergy.com/politics to switch your gas and electricity to Fuse and get your £20 credit and free Trip Plus membership.
Happy New Year. And
right, I actually did have a plan, because I'm just floating around like an idiot right now.
And with me, Alistair Campbell, also wishing you all a Happy New Year. So, Rory, let me ask the first question. This is
doesn't look like here's been raided yet.
With greater perspicacity, whatever that word is, than when you were predicting the outcome of the last US presidential election. What will the world look like at the end of 2026? And more importantly, this is from Douglas, a Trip Plus member from South Australia. What didn't you see coming in 2025? And with that in mind, what will the world look like at the end of 2026?
Well, this is a really good question. Very, very grateful for this one. So if you listen back to the episode we did exactly a year ago.
Did you really do that?
Yep, I did. I listened back to the episode we did exactly a year ago.
Right, give us a few highlights.
What we correctly predicted is we said Trump would come in and it would be a big, big shock to the world order. So we said there would be tariffs. We said that there would be a cut in international development spending. we said that he would move away from a rules-based international order.
What was that
and
guy
we talked
doing?
about Stephen Miller coming in and a more extreme views on things like immigration. Now, what we didn't predict is what that was actually going to look like. So let's just take them one by one. Tariffs. What turned out to be astonishing in 2025 is that it wasn't just a small amount of tariffs going in targeted at, for example, China, the big US adversary. What we ended up with was very heavy tariffs hitting Switzerland, 50% tariffs against India, tariffs against Canada. Secondly, we didn't predict that what he would do is he'd put up the tariffs, he'd bring down the tariffs, he'd put up the tariffs, he'd bring down the tariffs.
Right.
Thirdly, on tariffs, we imagined that there would be much clearer consequences. So the normal economic analysis would have been you put up the tariffs and you will find inflation in goods, and then the US markets will come down. And you might even find yourself in stagflation, inflation going up, growth coming down. In tariffs and in the other things that I'm going to mention, a theme keeps coming through, which is Trump did much more radical, unpredictable things with less moral consequence and less pushback than you ever could have acknowledged. So let's take immigration for another one, right? We projected that he would be doing stuff on immigration and that would have an effect on the US economy. We did not begin to imagine just
There's a lot of those blueprints going around.
would be. The way in which these masked agents will be storming into people's houses. We certainly won't.
1 second. Anyone out there want an Aphelion blueprint? Does anyone out here want an Aphelion blueprint? How much shit do I have? I need more stuff. Right. Already been opened, obviously. This is here. Syringe. Chemicals, masks. Who the fuck is this guy? You know what we need? That guy... No, wait. That guy there has been doing nothing. That guy there has been giving me shit all goddamn day for no reason. I have a blueprint. If you res me, I'll give you a blueprint. I'll give you a blueprint if you res me. You don't get the blueprint, bro. Bye. Fucking weirdos. I get it. Fuck you. I get to keep it. Ton of shit I need to get rid of. Oh, 56. Nice. Screw it. Let's do it again with a free loadout. And then after that, I have to go. Guys like, bullshit, you used the weapons. Where's there a fucking rule saying you can't do that? If you come at me and start smacking with the goddamn thing without saying it, I'm going to think this guy's a jerk if I want to kill him.
Portland, we weren't imagining, I think, the lack of pushback from the US system. And let's take another one, Congress. I don't think we would have imagined that if he tried to do what he basically did, which is ignore all the congressional appropriations, literally the legally binding decisions made by the US Congress on the budgets going forward, that there would be no pushback for that, or that he would be able to abolish USAID almost on day one, sack all the staff, stop all the funding immediately, and that the Congress and legal systems wouldn't be able to push back. And again, I don't think we certainly didn't predict that the US would strike Iran. We didn't predict that Israel would strike Doha, but we also probably struggled to imagine that those things could happen with much less real-world impact than you would have imagined. Doing those things would normally have a big risk of World War III, Israel striking catastrophic.
I am not going to die from a goddamn...
So what Trump did is he did much sharper things, but partly because of this up and down, up and down, up and down business, the reaction from markets, Congress, the courts, Europe and his allies was much more muted. Instead, what you had is endless people.
I've never been killed by one of those fucking things before. That's embarrassing.
With less consequence than you would imagine. Over to you.
While you were talking, I just sort of had a quick look through some of the highlights from the discussion that we had last year. You're right. I think we got a lot right. We got a few things wrong. Well, is this wrong? We basically said Elon Musk would be more dangerous to the world than Donald Trump. I think we got that wrong. I still think Musk is a major menace in the world.
Hey, nice.
X has become an utter disgusting cesspit. And it's revolting that he sort of set so much
and faster. Do I care about that?
But I think we got that wrong. We predicted that the Democratic Party would go into a bit of a slump until it found some compelling leadership. We also said there'd be major geopolitical shocks, and we included in those Syria. Whereas actually Syria has maybe turned out thus far better than was feared. That be fair?
Absolutely, but I think thus far, I think the structural issues in Syria haven't gone away. It's still the case that the Kurds have de facto ignored the Syrian government in everything east of the Euphrates, that the Druze and Alawite populations are not really reconciled.
Number 3 loadout. Okay.
That Israel is continuing to intervene and often strike Syria. And so the question of whether Trump lifting sanctions and embracing Mohammed al-Shara will be enough for him to deal with the fact that the Syrian economy is so fragile, the ethnic sectarian divisions remain so deep. I'm afraid, sadly, I'm praying Syria will be okay, but if it were to collapse in 2026, it wouldn't be very difficult to explain why.
Yeah. Here's one, Roy, that I think I will take some... No, I won't take any pleasure in repeating this, actually, but I think it's worth saying again. Populism, I said, will keep gaining unless the establishment parties improve their storytelling.
True.
I think if there's one thing to
populism is primarily built on stories.
You've got to keep storytelling. Now, in his case, that means making up stuff and bullying people and lying and intimidating. And I don't think we should go for that. But I think understanding that what the populists do better than the established parties is to kind of engage with people on a kind of emotional and a strategic level. I still don't think that the mainstream parties across Europe are doing that remotely well enough. I think the one who's getting closer to it, it's not in Europe, he's very much an ally of Europe, that's Mark Carney in Canada. But I think an awful lot of them are not telling a story about who they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it relates to your life.
Do you agree with me, though, that one of the things that's been strange is the sense that we would have predicted, I think, in 2024...
Oh, shit.
...that there would be more clear consequences for his actions. Maybe this is our own addiction to storytelling. Let's say a narrative, film is about, escalating drama and crisis, and then there's a reaction and there's a resolution. And so if you were a traditional American official and you were giving advice to President Trump and he was saying, I'm going to whack tariffs on India up to 50%. I'm going to throw tariffs on Canada up like this. I'm going to strike Iran. I'm going to ignore the congressional budget. I'm going to send anything. You would say, no, Mr. President, those things will have very dangerous consequences. What I think we're seeing is a world where you don't see the short-term consequences. What you see is the medium-term hollowing, erosion, degradation of all our institutions. So you don't get the pushback. Congress doesn't really step up. The courts don't step up. Europe doesn't really step up. The international democracies don't stand up to him. The Middle Eastern states don't stand up to him. It turns out that what instead happens is you keep names, you keep the idea of a Western alliance, you keep the slogan of NATO, but inside...
It's broken.
My analogy is here, I'm going to go rest this history on you. As the Roman Empire began to splinter, a lot of the institutions remained there, and nobody saw it happening. There was still a Senate, there were still consuls, there was still an emperor, and they didn't really acknowledge that, in effect, regional warlords were now running different parts of the thing, because the story remained the same. And I feel that's maybe what happens, that we're addicted to clear stories and clear crises.
Whoa, wait, okay.
What we may instead be in a world where it's very difficult to see, here's the moment. Because what Trump...
I don't have a defib, bro, sorry. But,
Well, let's go to the next question then, because it relates to this. Will Europe go to war with Russia in 2026? That is a question from Tony Mara, says, might Europe give Putin an ultimatum to withdraw from Ukraine?
Oh, shit, two people? Wow.
Now, there are people in Europe. When we were in Poland talking to Radek Sikorski, he said, so far as we're concerned, Russia is already at war with us. Now, Poland is part of Europe. Poland is right at the border there of this war that's taking place. And I think
killed by a kettle.
Go back to Litvinenko being killed. Was that what was that? Could you say that was part of a hybrid?
Right, 10 more minutes, I
Is all
think.
the sort of cybersecurity stuff and the attacks on companies that Russia does. Is that part of a war? The Skripals and the death of a British woman when they tried to wipe out what they define as a Russian traitor. So this has all been going on for a long time. What the question we have to keep asking ourselves is, how far is
too far?
And the thing that Sikorski said that really has stuck with me since he said it, he said, if Ukraine falls, we're next. Well, we, to him in that context, obviously means Poland, but Poland is, unlike Ukraine, part of the European Union. Poland is an important part of NATO. This becomes a whole different ballgame. And I just wonder whether one of the questions that we need to ask is whether, within the NATO context, Article 5 means what it did. So that if Europe does go to war with Russia, whether it's this year, next year, whatever, whether actually that is...
God, the seed storage is arguably the most useless...
That is a very, very big question.
Yeah, and the problem is that...
high-value area. I mean, and I mean that genuinely. It's shite.
Completely unnecessarily. I mean, the Article 5 guarantee, which is an attack on one is an attack on all, which is America saying from the 1940s onwards that if Russia or then the Soviet Union were to attack a NATO country, America would effectively
intervene,
nuclear weapons to defend it.
Yeah.
All you need to do to hold that article is just say it clearly, unambiguously, that an attack on one is an attack on all, and of course, if the Soviet Union or Russia were to attack a NATO country, we would defend them.
Yeah.
What Trump has done is completely unnecessarily destroyed all that confidence. You know, he thinks it's about saving money and proving that Europe was ripping them off and blah, 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 but it doesn't cost America anything to say that. Right? And it's about, again, to return to your story, about story, it's about communication. It's not actually, in the end, that much about American defense spending. They have the nukes already. They can already fire them at Moscow. They don't actually have to change much in their defense posture just to keep underlying that line. And as you say, that's gone. Let's add to that. Where else could there be conflicts? Still perfectly possible that in 2026 there could be conflict China-Taiwan. China could invade Taiwan, and as we keep reminding people, Taiwan produces 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors, 50% of the world's semiconductors in general. Ethiopia could go to war with Eritrea. There could be a confrontation in the South China Sea. But let's make it even worse. If we're talking about
Someone's already been up here.
Happen simultaneously. Right, Russia could annex eastern Ukraine and have a go at the Baltic at the same time as China goes after Taiwan. Then think about what happens to the global economic system as everybody scrabbles to impose sanctions on China, cut off Russian gas, rearm. You're then into a very, very odd world. And there the question is the US going to be the stabilizing power, acting to reinforce international laws, get people back on the straight and narrow, bail out the global
Probably
financial system?
not.
Remember 2008, a lot of that was the story about the US Treasury and the US Central Bank sitting down with European countries to try to put the American financial system behind stabilizing the global financial system. Do we think that's likely under Trump? No. And let's add to this. Let's say 2020, I'm going to add 2026, let's say there's a climate tipping point. We suddenly hit one of these extraordinary, horrible moments in global climate where it's not just a continuation of a few more floods, but actually we cross some threshold and much more chaotic and extreme things happen. Imagine if there is a real disaster with AI. Then things become much more unstable, and that's where Trump's irresponsibility, chaos, and selfishness becomes much more important. It's not just a sort of reality TV show. It's that you've removed the central linchpin of the international system and its ability to be resilient in crisis.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned when in the Christmas episodes, and we were doing our book of the year, and mine was this book, If Russia Wins. It's a sort of, it's called a scenario. It's not quite a novel because it's partly based on real events, but it then predicts what might happen. And where the story goes is that Russia mounts a very small invasion on a very small part of Estonia, and just sort of sends in the troops and takes this place over, and it gives all its logic, the reasons, and all the sort of Russian TV hosts talk about why this is necessary. And then the debate that gets sparked in America is, are we really going to shed American blood for some village in Estonia that we've never heard of? And that is the end of Article 5. And of course, this is all consistent. It's why I said that I thought the most consequential speech of the year I still think was J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference. It's all consistent with this message of saying, you lot aren't as serious as we think you should be. You're not as reliable as we think you should. You're kind of on your own. So then back to Poland, when the drones did start coming into Polish airspace, and Trump was asked about it, and he said, oh, well, it's probably a mistake. Why does he say that? Because he always defaults to this sort of pro-Putin position. And this goes back to what we talked about yesterday with Alexander Stubb. Trump wants this world of chaos disorder where strong men have their own spheres of influence. He gets the West, China gets the East, Russia gets what they want, and he's not taking into account the South and what Russia and China are doing there.
So, Alistair, here's a question for you from Ted Chu. Will we see national service in the UK or other countries?
Well, Macron in France recently announced a kind of voluntary national service. There's all sorts of developments of national service. I think, is it in Finland where they already have it for men and now women are kind of demanding that they have equal rights to national service, which sort of indicates the way the debate is going there. There are other countries where this debate is definitely happening. We've said many times on the podcast through 2025 that I'm really not convinced that the British mindset is fully cognizant of just how dangerous a world we're in right now, and whether this debate may have to start taking shape within the UK. What do you think?
Well, I think we should do it. And I think we should make it a national citizen service where you can also opt to do other things. You could opt to work as a hospital porter. You could opt to volunteer for charities. You could opt to do community projects as well as the military thing. But I don't see what the downside is. I mean, there's a substantial fiscal cost. But in a world which is increasingly unequal and divided, it is a chance to build solidarity between people from different parts of the country, different classes, and bring them together. Be a military element to that, be a civilian element to that.
But hold on, but Ted's question was very much about the military element. I mean, yours sounds like a nice, touchy-feely hybrid. Let's just think on do you think we should, because our armed forces have been pared that pretty substantially, these days should move towards a place where young men, I guess, are expected to do some kind of military service?
I think the route into that is to my hybrid. I think you could, I believe, and I think it's reasonable data to support this, that a very large number of young men would choose to do military training rather than choose to do their voluntary social work. It would be a question of personalities, and you would end up with many young people trained in the military, but it would be a way of selling it to the population, which is relevant, and it's also balanced, because what you're doing is you're saying there are many other things that this could do. I mean, one thing that it actually, the military was very good at, the National Service Institute, is providing education and vocational training. Very, very strong in literacy programs. The Army Education School, very strong in giving people crafts and trades. So I think the way to get it into the public is to explain it as something which, even if we didn't go to war with Russia, would be a general social good. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing doesn't rest on going to war with Russia. But yes, I think you could rarely, this is one of those rare examples of things where I think you can do both at the same time. And I think it would be wonderful to see the government step up to that and provide a progressive, exciting argument, which is, yes, partly about discipline and military training, but also about vocational training, trades, support for social work. I mean, if we're taking less and less people from other countries in and we're facing a crisis in the care sector and the hospital sector at the lower skill level, why is this something that young people can do? I mean, a lot of what's happening in care, some of it is very specialised, but some of it is helping somebody get change, providing company to them, talking to them. Some of the tasks performed in hospitals don't require very high levels of skill and could be a very good thing for somebody to do in a year of service.
Okay. I should point out to our listeners and viewers that when we put out an appeal for questions for this New Year episode, that question about whether Europe and Russia are likely to go to war came way ahead of anything else. So that suggests that where a lot of these minds are going visit. Diana Ward, TripQuest member from Putin File, asking this: why not move the G20 meeting scheduled for Florida in 2026, given the US did not show up for the last one and has already disinvited South Africa from G20 2026? Why reward, in quotes, such poor behaviour? I'm with that. I'm with that. I mean,
disinviting is completely outrageous. You can't disinvite the G20 country. I mean, it's not the G20.
Especially as the reason is founded on this kind of myth that is all part of his sort of white supremacist approach to immigration and race and these issues banging on about. I actually thought the G20 summit went pretty well without the United States.
It's sort of beyond imagining. I mean, look at who is in the G20. There could be some pretty strong reasons not to have the Russians there, given that what they're actually doing is killing hundreds of thousands of people on the European borders and invading another country. There could even be reasons, if you wanted to be controversial, not to have China there, given what they do in Tibet, what they do in Xinjiang, what they're doing in terms of human rights. You could even have reasons not to have India there, given the fact that Indian intelligence officers now appear to be associated in court cases in the US and Canada with assassinating citizens in other people's countries. Of all the countries to disinvite from the G20, South Africa seems to be the most bizarre thing. And what is going on in their heads? Where are the standards? Where's the logic in this?
And also, I wonder whether the Johannesburg G20, whether any of the other 19, because America weren't there, said, listen, they're not here. We've got quite a lot done. It's meant to be in Florida. If we go to Florida next year, it's all going to be about correct, rather than G20. Why don't we just decide to have it somewhere else and invite him?
But this goes back to our bigger point, which is we now are beginning to realise that basically the whole world, since 1945, invited America into its body like a parasite. We put this huge virus inside our body politic called the United States. And the reason why he's able to do everything he does is that they are indispensable. They're wired into every one of our systems, our financial systems, trade systems, our defense systems. So the reason he can do this is that it's almost impossible as Mark Carney is saying, Mark Carney confronts the US, then has to face what that really means, which
Costs,
is
yeah.
it will literally wipe out growth in the Canadian economy. Almost impossible to divert and rebalance away their oil and gas exports. So getting ourselves resilient, independent of the US, and able to say thank you very much, we will proceed with the G20 without you, is not possible at the moment because we've spent 80 years being lured into having bodies that are not really our own bodies. They're bodies controlled by this alien parasite.
Bloody hell, Roy. That's strange stuff. Take a burner phone next time you go to America.
Okay, Alistair, on that cheery note, let's take a quick break and then back for more questions.
See you in a minute. Welcome back to this question time with me, Alistair.
And with me, Rory Stewart. Question from you, Pedro Quest. Is AI 2027 still in trajectory to happen?
Well, it's happening, but Roy, I don't know what that's a question for me. You are absolutely obsessed with AI and have been for some time, and you're halfway through this mini-series that we've been doing about AI, so that is definitely a question for you.
This is a big year because 26-27 is when a lot of the tech leaders predicted artificial general intelligence will emerge. And we don't know yet whether these enormous energy-sucking large language models are going to hit natural barriers or whether they can break through and create this general purpose superintelligence. In a way, for the world's sake, it might be no bad thing if they don't break through. If we had a few more years to try to think this through and think about what the boundaries are. Because if they do break through, which I'm seeing from before the break, these large language models sit in the United States and we will be even more dependent on America for everything that runs our economy and public services. But also, these things could be very, very dangerous if they became super intelligent, and it's not clear to me that actually we have really thought about how to...
Shit!
The other big question, I suppose, is geopolitical question. That, again, most of the discussion around AI, and I'll come to you on this. One of the things that...
Fuck. No ammo left.
Is that the model in Britain over the last 2 years is to say what we need to do is make ourselves much closer to the US AI systems.
God damn it. What a shit time to run out of ammo.
Is possible from the Chinese systems. And that obviously is the story led from Washington, California. That there's a binding
I need heavy ammo.
US or China. And obviously what Europe needs to do is do everything it can to let the US system win, put the US system right at the heart of everything we do.
Right, where do I find
That's the right
heavy ammo? I find heavy ammo where? Where? Let me think. I need to think.
In the current political context, but I wonder whether it is the right decision. One of the most interesting things of recent months, and
You know what might have it?
really has been recent months, when you and I are out and about talking to different audiences. We did this when we were on tour. I've done it at a lot of business events we've done. And this is this question we ask people about whether America or China
My ammo. Shit.
to global stability, to supply chains, and to all these other things that we talk about. And I did one in Dublin where the US ambassador to Ireland was there, and I think he was really quite taken aback.
I've got one shot.
Because
Fuck.
in that audience, and in virtually every other audience that we've done in recent months, people have looked at America, the United States, as a bigger threat to some of these issues. So might there be a case actually for facing down the US might be
Fuck you. Oh.
really kind of very much opposed.
Well, fuck it. I got the experience.
I don't know, because I, unlike you, I don't really know enough about the way this technology is working. What I do
I nearly had you. I nearly had you.
the choice that all countries in the world are having to face, because America and China are so far ahead of everybody else. And I think there was a point at which maybe we were trying to... I think we're probably in the second league order.
Okay,
and
let's
that's
go.
a good place to be. But I think that in making that choice, I think there are broader geopolitical questions that...
All right, I gotta go. Okay, catch you guys.